Rare is a video game developer located in Twycross, Leicestershire. The company was established in 1985 by Tim and Chris Stamper, founders of Ultimate.Play.The game. During its early years, Rare kept an air of secrecy and, backed by an unlimited budget from Nintendo, primarily concentrated on Nintendo Entertainment System games. During this time they created successful titles such as Wizards and Warriors, Battletoads, and RC Pro-Am. Rare became a prominent second-party developer for Nintendo, who came to own 49% of the company. Rare received international recognition and critical acclaim for games such as Donkey Kong Country, GoldenEye 007, Banjo-Kazooie, Perfect Dark, and Conker's Bad Fur Day. In 2002, Microsoft acquired Rare, who retained their original brand, logo, and most intellectual properties. It has since focused on developing games exclusively for Microsoft Studios video game consoles. Notable releases include Cameo, Elements of Power, Perfect Dark Zero, and Viva Pinata. In 2007, founders Tim and Chris Stamper left the company to pursue other opportunities, and, in 2010, the company's focus shifted to Kinect, releasing 3 different Kinect sports games. In 2015, Rare released Rare Replay to celebrate their 30th anniversary. Rare is currently working on Sea of Thieves, a multiplayer adventure game. Several key employees left Rare to form their own companies, such as Free Radical Design and Playtonic Games. History. Founding Rare evolved from Ashby Computers and Graphics Limited, better known by the trade name Ultimate.Play.The game, and founded in Ashby-de-la-Zouch by former arcade game developers Tim and Chris Stamper. After multiple critically and commercially successful releases including Night Law, Saber Wolf, and Jetpack, Ultimate.Play.The game was among one of the biggest UK-based video game development companies. The ZX Spectrum home computer, the platform the company usually developed games for, was only popular in the UK, and they believed that working on that platform would not be beneficial to the company's growth as they considered it a dead end. Meanwhile, the company inspected an imported console from Japan, the Famicom, and believed that it would be an ideal future platform of choice for the company as it was more sophisticated than the Spectrum, had a worldwide market, and its cartridges had no load times. As a result, a new subdivision named Rare Limited was established by Ashby Computers and Graphics Limited in 1985. Its main goal was to reverse engineer the console and investigate the codes for Famicom's games to learn more about the console's programming. With successful results, the company decided to sell the Ultimate brand to U.S. Gold, and ceased games development for the ZX Spectrum in the following year. Famicom's owner, Nintendo, once claimed that it would be impossible for their console to be decoded. Using the information the Ashby Computers and Graphics team learnt from the Rare division, the team prepared several tech demos and showed them to the Nintendo executive Minoru Arakawa in Kyoto. Impressed with their efforts, Nintendo decided to grant the Ashby team an unlimited budget for them to work on games for the Famicom platform. After they returned to England, they moved from Ashby-de-la-Zouch to Twycross, and established a new studio using the name of the subdivision, Rare. They set their headquarters in a manor farmhouse. Rare also set up another company known as Rare Inc. in Miami, Florida. Headed by Joel Hochberg, the American company was involved in maintaining Rare's operation in the U.S. and contacting major U.S. publishers. Famicom was eventually released in the UK under the name Nintendo Entertainment System. With the unlimited budget, the Rare studio could work a large variety of different games. The first project Rare worked on was Slalom, an ice skiing title. The company then worked with various gaming publishers that included Tradewest, Acclaim Entertainment, Electronic Arts, Sega, Mindscape, and Gamatech to produce over 60 games for the NES and several additional Game Boy conversions. Rare worked on licensed properties such as A Nightmare on Elm Street and Hollywood Squares, and ports including Marble Madness, Narc, and Sid Meier's Pirates. They also helped in creating new and original intellectual properties, including Battletoads, a beat-em-up inspired by the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise, RC Pro-Am, a vehicular combat game with racing elements, and Snake Rattle N-Roll, an action platform game with Tim Stamper's developing the game's graphics. The development of some of Rare's games were outsourced to Zippo Games, including Wizards and Warriors and the third installment of the Jetpack series, Solar Jetman: Hunt for the Golden Warship. Rare eventually acquired Zippo Games. According to Sant Pickford, a Rare team member through the late 80s and the early 90s, Rare just wanted to make as many games as they could in their window of opportunity. However, despite the huge catalog of games, none became a critical success for the company, while less creativity and innovation were shown despite the games making large profits. When the Super Nintendo Entertainment System was conceived, the Rare studio was not yet ready for the change. Rare limited their releases to some Battletoads games and decided to invest their significant NES profit in purchasing expensive silicon graphics workstations to make three-dimensional models. This move made Rare the most technologically advanced developer in the UK, and situated them high in the international market. Their priority also changed at that time, as the team decided to focus on quality instead of quantity. Partnership with Nintendo. Rare, using the SGI systems, created a boxing game demo and presented it to Nintendo. As the SNES system at that time could not render all of the SGI graphics at once, Rare used the SGI graphics to produce 3D models and graphics, before pre-rendering these graphics onto the cartridge of the SNES system, a process known as advanced computer modeling. Their progress with the 3D graphics on the SGI systems impressed Nintendo, and in 1994, Nintendo bought a 25% stake in the company that gradually increased to 49%, making Rare a Nintendo second-party developer. During this period, Rare started selling their games under the trademark name Rareware. The company was considered one of Nintendo's key developers and had enough recognition that Nintendo offered the Rare studio the Nintendo catalog of characters to create a 3D CGI game. The Stampers asked for Donkey Kong. The resulting game was Donkey Kong Country, which was developed by a total of 20 people, and enjoyed a 18-month development cycle. Rare staff also visited Twycross Zoo, observing and videotaping real gorillas. The game was a critical success, with critics praising the game's highly advanced visuals and art style. Donkey Kong Country sold over 8 million copies worldwide, making it the second best-selling game in the SNES library. The game received several Game of the Year honors and was followed by two sequels, Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Kong Quest, and Donkey Kong Country 3, Dixie Kong's Double Trouble, as well as several handheld spin-offs such as the Donkey Kong Land series. Nintendo's stake purchase allowed Rare to expand significantly. The number of staff members increased from 84 to 250, and Rare moved out from their headquarters at the Manor Farmhouse. Rare also developed a CGI arcade fighting game, Killer Instinct, on their own custom-built arcade machine. Killer Instinct was set to be released for Nintendo's own 64-bit system, Nintendo 64, in 1995, but was forced to release the game for the 16-bit SNES system, and had to downgrade the game's graphics. Killer Instinct sold 3.2 million copies, and was followed by a sequel, Killer Instinct 2. Killer Instinct Gold, the console version of Killer Instinct 2, suffered from a graphical downgrade due to the compression technology used to fit the arcade version onto the smaller Nintendo 64 cartridge. Rare then developed Blast Corps for the Nintendo 64. The game sold 1 million copies, which was considered disappointing by Rare. At that time, Rare was split into several teams, working on different projects. A large-scaled platformer was set to be released afterwards but was delayed. As a result, Rare changed their schedule and released their smaller projects first. The first project was GoldenEye 007, a game based on the titular film. The project was led by Martin Hollis and development was conducted by an inexperienced team. Inspired by Sega's Virtua Cop, GoldenEye 007 had originally been an on-rail shooter before the team decided to expand the gameplay and turn it into a free-roaming first-person shooter. New elements, such as stealth, headshot mechanic and reloading, were introduced. A split-screen multiplayer was added to the game by the end of its development. GoldenEye 007 was the first console first-person shooter and it was released 2 years after the release of the film. The game received very high critical praise and received numerous awards. It is often credited for having revolutionized the genre of first-person shooting video games. GoldenEye 007 remained as one of the best-selling games for 2 years, and sold more than 8 million units worldwide. Rare then developed Diddy Kong Racing, their first self-published game. Originally intended as a real-time strategy game involving cavemen, the game was reimagined into a racing game prior to its release in 1997. It was one of the fastest-selling games at the time, as recorded by the Guinness Book of Records. Diddy Kong Racing also features protagonists from some future Rare games, including Banjo and Conker. At the time, Rare was still working on the large-scale platform game. Originally codenamed Dream Land of Giants, it was a game featuring a young boy named Edson and pirates. The protagonist was then replaced by a bear known as Banjo, and Rare expanded the role of Kazooie the bird. Banjo-Kazooie was released in June 1998 to critical acclaim. A sequel, Banjo Tour, was released several years later. Upon the completion of Banjo-Kazooie's development, Hollis immediately began another project. Originally set to be a tie-in for Tomorrow Never Dies, Rare was significantly outbid by another publisher, forcing Rare to develop a new concept with new characters. With a major emphasis on lighting, the game was named Perfect Dark. Hollis left Rareware for Nintendo 14 months after the start of Perfect Dark's development. Around the same time, numerous employees left the company and formed new studios. With major project leads departing, a new team took over its development and diminished the role of lighting in the game, making it a more straightforward first-person shooter. Despite the game's troubled development, it did not affect the progress of Rare's other teams. When Perfect Dark was still in development, Rareware released 2 other titles, Jet Force Gemini and Donkey Kong 64. Perfect Dark eventually resurfaced and it was released in 2000 to critical acclaim. The game sold approximately 2 million copies. Conker the Squirrel also had its own game. Originally named Conker's Quest, the title was renamed to 12 Tales. Conker 64. However, the new title was criticized for being too family-friendly and too similar to Banjo-Kazooie. As a result, the team renamed the game to Conker's Bad Fur Day and was re-revealed again in 2000. Conker's Bad Fur Day, unlike Banjo-Kazooie, was intended for a mature audience, and features violence, profanity and scatological humor. The game received positive reviews from critics, but was a commercial failure as the game was released at the end of the Nintendo 64's life cycle and the game was not actively promoted by Nintendo. After the completion of Diddy Kong Racing, another team was working on a new game known as Dinosaur Planet for the Nintendo 64. Unlike previous Star Fox games, Star Fox Adventures focused on ground-based open-world exploration. The game received positive reviews upon its launch in 2002. Star Fox Adventures was the first and last game developed by Rare for GameCube. Microsoft's era game development costs gradually increased, and Nintendo did not provide Rare with more capital or purchased the company's remaining stake. Rare then looked for potential buyers. In early 2000, workers from Activision and Microsoft began visiting Rare with purchase offers. Rare was interested in Activision's offer, but the deal collapsed, and on 24 September 2002 Microsoft paid $375 million for the company. Rare became a first-party developer for Microsoft's Xbox character trademarks from games developed by Rare for Nintendo consoles, such as Conker of Conker's Bad Fur Day and Banjo of the Banjo-Kazooie series, were retained by Rare. Intellectual property created by Nintendo, such as Donkey Kong and Star Fox, were retained by Nintendo. This left Donkey Kong Racing, due for release for the GameCube, unreleased. Since Microsoft is currently not part of the handheld video game console market, Rare continued to develop games for Nintendo handheld consoles after the acquisition. In August 2003, Rare and Microsoft entered an agreement with THQ for Rare to publish games for the Game Boy Advance, including Saber Wolf, a game based on an Ultimate character, Banjo-Kazooie. Grunty's Revenge, initially intended as a Game Boy Color game, and its Mr. Pants, a puzzle game originally developed as Donkey Kong. Coconut Crackers. January 2005 saw the completion of this deal with the release of Banjo Pilot, known as Diddy Kong Pilot, before the Microsoft acquisition. In 2003, Rare released their first Microsoft game, Grabbed by the Ghoulies, a humorous action-adventure game set in a haunted house full of crazed creatures. Originally intended as a free-roaming game, it was significantly streamlined in design and concept. The game received mixed reviews from critics, and was considered Rare's worst and least popular game. At the May 2004 E3, Microsoft's Ken Lobb said that Rare had obtained Nintendo DS development kits and was working on 2 games for the Nintendo DS. Shortly afterwards, Microsoft issued a statement that the company and its studios had no plans for Nintendo DS development. However, in July 2005, Rare posted job openings for Nintendo DS development on its website and said that it was creating key DS titles. The first of these games was Diddy Kong Racing DS, a remake of the Nintendo 64 title Diddy Kong Racing, which was released in February 2007. Rare released Conker Live and Reloaded, a remake of Conker's Bad Fur Day, in 2005 with updated graphics and a reworked multiplayer option. The game received generally favorable reviews but, similar to Bad Fur Day, was a commercial failure. Xbox successor Xbox 360 was released in 2005, and 2 of its launch titles were developed by Rare: Perfect Dark Zero and Cameo. Elements of Power. Zero, a prequel to the first Perfect Dark, was originally intended for Nintendo GameCube before its redesign as an Xbox 360 game. Rare removed several features to meet the game's release deadline. Cameo. Elements of Power was also intended for the Nintendo GameCube, a new intellectual property. In it, the player character shapeshifts to solve puzzles. Although both games received generally positive reviews from critics and sold more than 1 million copies, they were considered disappointments. Yet, so much of the money went towards Gears of War, which is going to sell millions anyway. It was a bit of like, what about the other franchise? I think we got left in the wake somewhat. Software engineer James Thomas, on the marketing campaign for Viva Pinata in 2006, the company released Viva Pinata, a game involving gardening, incorporating elements of several franchises. It was acclaimed as innovative. The game's commercial performance was a disappointment, however, and some Rare team members questioned Microsoft Studios' large marketing budget for Gears of War and its relative neglect of Viva Pinata. On the 2nd of January 2007, Rare founders Chris and Tim Stamper left the company to pursue other opportunities. Former lead designer Greg Mayles became Rare's creative director and Mark Betteridge the company's studio director. That year saw the release of Jetpack Refueled, a remake of Jetpack for Xbox Live Arcade. Rare unveiled their work on Xbox Live avatars, Viva Pinata, Trouble in Paradise, and Banjo-Kazooie. Nuts and Bolts in 2008. Nuts and Bolts received significant criticism of its focus on vehicle construction rather than traditional platforming. Despite good reviews, the company's Microsoft titles sold poorly and Microsoft decided to restructure the studio at the end of the decade. In March 2010, Rare opened a new facility at Paisley Studios in Digbeth, Birmingham. Later that year, Microsoft confirmed that Scott Henson, a developer who had worked on the hardware and software designs of the Xbox 360 console and Kinect for Xbox 360, replaced Mark Bettridge as studio manager and announced a focus on Xbox Live avatars. Rare also shifted their focus to Kinect. According to Henson, Kinect will be the main focus for Rare going forwards as it's a very rich canvas. This is just the beginning of an experience that will touch millions of people. Rare's first Kinect project, Kinect Sports, was released in November 2010. Originally Sports Star, a more complex sports sim, the game was streamlined into what Microsoft executive Don Mattrick hoped would be the Kinect equivalent of Wii Sports. According to a former Rare employee, the team was worried about the game during its development because of Kinect's limitations. Despite average reviews, it was a commercial success, selling 3 million units by May 2011. Many non-Kinect teams at Rare and Big Park, another Microsoft studio, collaborated on the development of sequel Kinect Sports Season 2. In March 2011, Scott Henson announced that Craig Duncan, who had worked on Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing and the Colin McRae Rally series, was hired as senior studio director. Simon Woodruff, who had worked at several studios, became the studio's creative director in April 2012. A Rare property, Killer Instinct, was revived in 2013. The company had a supporting role in its development, assisting lead developer Double Helix Games. After poor sales of Kinect Sports Rivals and Microsoft's announcement that Kinect would no longer be a priority, about 15 Rare employees were laid off. On 10 February 2015, a group of former Rare employees announced the formation of a new studio, Playtonic Games, and planned a spiritual successor to the Banjo-Kazooie franchise entitled Yooka-Laylee. According to Rare composer Robin Beanland, the year would be significant for the company. At the June E3 2015, a new compilation game, Rare Replay, was introduced. It was released in August. The compilation, with 30 of the studio's published titles, lacked some popular Rare franchises due to licensing issues with Nintendo. A new game, Sea of Thieves, was introduced.